I expected this deck to be terrible, like near unplayable bad. But it's actually been a lot of fun to build and to play. Out of the 10 games I have played so far, I have won the most recent 8 of them consecutively. The most recent one was against True Draco. That was just such a painful game. Anyway, here is the deck. I'm going to go card by card and also at the same time kind of talk about a few things that I have thoughts on the deck and this list. So we're going to start us off with our level 1 tuner monsters. Jurek Aello is the first one here. Doesn't do anything. Scrap Searcher is a really interesting card that when it is summoned to the field destroys all non-scrap monsters you control, which sounds terrible. However, Scrap Golem can summon monsters from your graveyard to either player's side of the field, and you do choose the position. So you can throw this card onto your opponent's board in attack mode, destroy all monsters they control, and there is now a level doesn't matter, but a 100 attack point monster in attack mode on your opponent's field. This does help play around things like Battle Fader or Gores if your opponent was going to be wanting to use them to augment their levels. But also, of course, as a level 1 tuner, at the point in the combo where you're summoning it to your field, there are only scrap monsters on the field, so it doesn't matter. Then Jet Synchron and Ocrust Brass Bombard. 3 of Maxi, 3 of Scrap Recycler, 3 of Ash Blossom Joy Spring, Ghost Bell Haunted Mansion, Orcus Symbol Skeleton, and 2 Psychic Wielder. Okay, so Psychic Wielder is a really interesting, really cool level 3 tuner monster to be playing in here. It summons itself when you control a level 3 monster, and since we're not playing Lynx, Scrap Recycler doesn't really have anywhere else to go, so it's sitting on the board for you. So it summons itself then, and then when you synchro with it, it will destroy a monster on the field with attack less than the synchro monster summoned. So because we're using this to summon Coral Dragon, that is 2400, and then Coral Dragon will also be able to destroy another card on your opponent's field by actually discarding, so that puts Orcus in the graveyard. And then Coral Dragon is a level 6 synchro monster that is a tuner. So you can use that to then synchro into Baron from there. But also Coral Dragon will trigger off of that and draw another card. So this just works out super, super well with Scrap Recycler and Coral Dragon. Then we've got Scrap Chimera. This can only be used as synchro material when synchro summoning Scrap Dragon. That is the only monster that can be summoned with this. The levels just don't line up for anything else. However, that is extremely powerful. One of the main things you're wanting to do in this deck is, same as usual, open Scrap Factory and Scrap Raptor. Then you can use the Raptor and the Factory in combination to get Golem on your field and Chimera in your hand. The Golem will summon the Raptor, then you can go into Scrap Twin Dragon and use the Chimera to bring back the Raptor and go into regular Scrap Dragon with that. Of course, there are other ways in here to extend that further, but that is the most basic form of the combo. Then Rosenix will get a level 1 tuner monster, a level 1 token on the field, so you can use that in combination with the level 1 tuner monsters to go into Formula Synchron, and that gives you some really good ways into Baron, especially with all the level 8 synchros that are being made in this deck. And as I mentioned, there are discard outlets like Coral Dragon. I am only on 1 miscellaneous source. There's another card I'll mention later that I'm thinking about taking out in exchange for the second one that I do have. Orcust Harpor, Girsu. So Girsu can be treated as a tuner monster if there are 2 more cards in its column, but also it can summon a token to your field and also to your opponent's field, but importantly to your own field, same as Rosenix for getting into Formula Synchron. And that is, of course, in addition to being able to send any Orcust you want from the deck to the graveyard. So then 3 Scrap Raptor, 2 of Scrap Golem. I thought I was going to cut this to 1. However, the Scrap Synchro monsters have effects that when they are destroyed, they can summon a scrap from the graveyard. And unlike in the regular Scrap Ocrust deck, we are not replacing Factory with Babel before the end phase. So Factory is actually just sitting on the field. So when a Scrap Synchro monster is destroyed, you actually get to summon the Golem from the graveyard and the Golem from the deck. And of course, putting 2 Golems on the board can be really, really good, especially if you have Geomathmech Final Sigma, a level 12 monster. But that will combine the 2 Golems and Formula Synchron into a level, will be able to make a level 12 Synchro monster, and of course, the Golems are bringing monsters back from your graveyard as well. So you can actually make a level 7 or a level 8 in addition to that. Unless, of course, you're using one of them to bring back Scrap Searcher so that you can actually go into the formula there. But that would let you go into Geomathmech. I don't have a Geomathmech, but if I did, that's the main way into it. 2 Kamungas and 3 Raiden. So I was about to say Radan. I've been playing Elden Ring. So these, same as usual, they're level 7s with the level 1 tuners, helps get into level 8 synchros. Less kaijus than normal. The easy way into the level 8 synchro isn't as powerful, given that we aren't going into Borreload's Savage Dragon in this deck. So 5 kaijus is actually enough to open the most games. Just 1 of Orcus Nightmare, and then 2 World Wand. World Wand summons itself, the one that's in your hand if you send one from your deck to the graveyard. But also without Galatea, it is very important to be able to recycle. Yes, I do normally play 2 World Wand, but it is especially important here. 3, however, would be bricky. The Iris Sword Soul, this is an interesting card that seems like it should be extremely powerful, especially if this was a level 7. I would be all on board for this. It has not come up for me. There has been a lot of non-destruction negation that I've run into. I've just not had this card in hand at that time. And I do have a second one, so it's either this and Miscellaneous Source are kind of fighting for the spot that I'm looking at replacing. Regeki, I think, is a lot better in this format than usual. Baron is really the only card that is consistently going to be contesting it in terms of monsters. Then Harpy's Feather Duster, Monster Reborn, Foolish Burial, Terraforming, 3 of Fossil Dig, and 3 of Scrapyard, just to, of course, get us into that main combo. 2 Lightning Storm, 3 Scrap Factory, Twin Twister is also at 3, and then Pot of Acquisitiveness. This is the card that I'm thinking about taking out of here. This card on paper seems like it should be really good, and in fact very necessary, since it does recycle our banished Orcus monsters, and again, without Galatea, there's not really a good way of doing that. However, I'm finding that games actually tend to end before this would even potentially come up. Or I have Orcus banished, but I actually want them there so that I can summon them with World Wand. So this hasn't actually been all that good, so I'm thinking about replacing it with either a second Iris Sword Soul or with a second Miscellaneous Saurus. Of course, there are a lot of situations in which this could be relevant. So 2 Called by the Grave and 2 of Infinite Impermanence will close us out for the 60 card main deck. On to the extra, I've already mentioned, but Formula Synchron, of course, is extremely powerful. Armory Arm can be very, very strong if you can put it onto basically any of your Synchro monsters, but if you put it onto something like a Scrap Dragon or a Scrap Twin Dragon, it puts a huge threat on the board that at the same time, while it's a threat, it's also something your opponent can't really destroy. because if they do, you're going to be summoning 2 scrap golems off of it. So they do actually have to jump through some hoops to get over something like that, especially with the 1000 attack bonus that you get off of Armory Arm. But also this makes it very, very difficult for your opponent to stall games out by just setting monsters over and over again, which I of course have done in this deck and we'll get into later in the Synchro monsters, a monster that is specifically in here to do that. Celestial Wolf Lord, Blue Sirius. This card is awful. However, it is a dark level 6 Synchro monster, so it can be summoned using the Orcus line. Goyle Predator destroys guys by battle and summons them to your field. Coral Dragon, I've already talked about. This card is insane. It is so good. This is one of the best cards in this extra deck. I actually was playing this in my regular Orcus deck for a long time. Ancient Pixie Dragon. This is a dark level 7 monster that can be so it can be summoned with the Orcus line. That's pretty much the answer. It does also draw you a card when you activate a field spell, though generally that's going to be on the field already at the time of summoning, but it does allow you to actually destroy a card on the field as well, specifically an attack position monster. Yazi, I am considering putting a Marimare into my main deck for this card, but it actually hasn't come up for me. I've just not actually summoned Yazi yet. Colossal Fighter. This card is a level 8 dark synchro monster that can be summoned with the Orcus line. This card will replace itself every time it is destroyed by battle. It'll just summon itself back to the field. So that's pretty much the thought there, is that you can summon this guy. It's either a 2800 attack point monster that's kind of hard to deal with, or it is a card you can just summon and sit on until you have the ability to go into Formula Synchron and use it with Formula to go into Baron, which I did do against my most recent opponent who was playing True Draco. So then 2 Scrap Dragon. I think that's self-explanatory there. Angel of Zera. This card will get stronger if your opponent has banished cards and also return itself to the field if it is banished. So just a very strong way to deal with any of the banished decks, or any of the banished decks rather, that were not banned for this event. Cyframe Lord Omega is just kind of a recycle tool. Enlightenment Paladin is another level 8 dark monster, this one with 2500 attack points and a burn damage effect. Scrap Twin Dragon is the main card you're really trying to go into. As I mentioned, very, very easy to summon, but once you summon it, this does require a Scrap Tuner, so unlike Scrap Dragon, this can't be summoned using Girsu when it's being treated as a tuner. But once you do summon it, you can destroy a card you control and return 2 cards your opponent controls to the hand, and that is cards, not specifically monsters, just cards. So you can return spell traps with this, and you can also return your own kaijus with this. So you can kaiju something, use Scrap Twin, bounce your kaiju and one of your opponent's spell traps, and tribute for your kaiju again. So that can of course be extremely powerful. And then finally, Baron de Fleur. And as I mentioned, Geomathmech Final Sigma, if I had one, then that would absolutely be in here. It's a level 12 synchro monster that's unaffected by everything, is basically attacking with 6000 because you're just putting it in the extra monster zone, and would be an extremely good way to close out games, but also something you can do if you have a Baron on the field that is just kind of sitting there. You can actually synchro using the Baron and Formula into it. I believe I need to check Mathmex. I need to check Final Sigma's materials, make sure it is 1+, like I think it is. But if so, you can do that and then actually use the Omega to return the Baron from your graveyard to your extra deck, so you can actually keep going into it again. But yeah, that's the deck. As I said, I have won 8 consecutive games with this out of the 10 games that I have played. and it's been a lot of fun. Again, though, warning, this deck does not play itself. It will constantly give you choices between different lines that will lead you in completely different directions. Basically, things like, am I going to do scrap plays this turn, or am I going to activate some Orcusts and go into that? What will set me up better for next turn, especially in games like I had against the True Draco player, which I didn't have access to a tuner. Not because I wouldn't have naturally had them, but because my opponent kept banishing my tuners. So that's the deck. Some thoughts on it. I would, as I said, this deck has been a lot of fun to build. So I would be very interested to see any ideas that you have about it as well.